What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Teammate. Today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of Monster Hunter World Iceborne DLC or expansion on the PC. So this has surprisingly mixed reviews on Steam compared to the other game, the actual base game, Monster Hunter World, which has had great success. Now, with the addition of the DLC, I was expecting nothing but positive reviews. However, it would seem that somehow they've managed to botch the DLC. Now, what I've been hearing, or what I've been understanding upon reading off of people's experiences here, is that it's been using a significant amount of CPU usage. For a lot of the users, especially the quad-core users, like the old Intel i5s, i7s, all those quad-core users have had their entire CPU used up to 100%, which makes the game virtually unplayable because at certain spots you end up freezing, skipping, and your game completely crashes at times. And not everyone knows how to, monitor temps and monitor usage, so most people don't know what the hell's going on. They just figure the DLC is broken. It's not far from the truth. There's a lot of work to be done on this DLC, this expansion that Capcom has seemingly ported from the console versions without really tweaking it enough to make it readily playable for most people. I myself have had little issues with it. Keep in mind that I'm not running by any means a top tier system. I've got a Ryzen 5 2600 and a 1070 Ti, which isn't anything really remarkable. It's more mid-spec, if anything. But I'm going to say it's because of the 6 cores as opposed to the 4 cores. I have had relatively little issue with the new DLC, but I have noticed the CPU usage being significantly higher. At times, all 6 cores are being used up to 80%, sometimes even 85%. Not steadily, but enough to raise a little bit of concern. Now, this in itself causes a problem for anyone who has less than 6 cores. And I'm not talking about the AMD FX bulldozer processors. Those are kind of trash. I have one myself, that's how I know. I used to overheat it when I played PUBG. But for anyone who's got Intel i5, i7, and they're running quad-core setups, we're seeing 100% usage on all those 4 cores, which is a little concerning because obviously you want to be able to play the game when it comes out. However, people are still not able to. And there's a fix that comes with this. Now, you can go into your NVIDIA settings and you can actually set a frame cap for yourself. And there's other programs that you're likely able to do this with as well. But NVIDIA, you can set a frame cap, which obviously is not something you want to do, right? You've got probably a decent computer, but if you want to play the game at this day and age, at this date, setting a frame cap might be the compromise you need to do. Reason being is because most computers struggle a little bit, especially the quad cores, to run it at the full 60 frames per second. So you have to kind of, unfortunately, sacrifice a little bit of a few frames. By a few, I mean half, which is significant, right? You want to be able to play at the 60 frames, but a lot of people have had to cut it down to the 30 frames per second, and that does take a good amount of stress off of the CPU. And it's not more of a stress test than it is a game, so you're actually able to enjoy it without worrying about burning anything on your motherboard. Now, that aside, CPU usage aside, there have been other cons, we can call them, to the DLC itself. So, namely being the fact that, for the most part, the performance issues seem to stem from the DRM. A lot of the time they say, I've been told that the DRM has to do with a high CPU usage, which is certainly possible. De novo DRM, this is nothing new. However, the other thing are the key bindings. So for us keyboard and mouse users, myself included, they've double binded certain controls. So you have certain controls controlling several functions, which in itself isn't always a problem, but you find yourself struggling to find the correct keys at times, especially considering the fact that the melee and range configurations are separate. You have to tweak both of them back to what you had before, which will never exactly be the same because there are certain bindings that have conflicts with each other now with the added bindings. But again, it causes a reason for why they had to add these bindings. I get it with the clutch claw that they have in the game now, which is a pretty neat tool, but we'll talk about that later. I get it that they had to add extra bindings to the keys and just to accommodate for the newer functions that the game has, which is nice. The newer mechanics, they're pretty nice. But again, they could have made their key bindings a little bit better. They could have kept it a little bit more similar to what it was before the update, because before the update, everyone's used to it at that point. Why change it now? Like, why change it in such a drastic manner? So everyone's pretty much backwards, right? Then you have to reset it, take the time, go out of your way to reset it. Which, again, I'm nitpicking, but it's a big enough thing, right? And we've seen this before, really, with the issues. Again, it's really nothing new as far as Monster Hunter World goes. Anyways, they have the connectivity issues, which again, like I said, it's nothing really new. I haven't noticed that it came back, but I have been getting disconnected a little bit more. I've heard that some people have had the issues as well, which is unfortunate. Obviously, it's not something you want, right? But it has been happening. It has been happening. Now, I'm going to get to a couple of the pros before I start bashing this DLC and expansion completely. So before, I go out and say, oh, it's awful, don't buy it, I would maybe recommend that you wait to buy it as opposed to not buying it. I would suggest maybe waiting until they fix it. Like, you'll hear word around the internet that they've fixed it, either on Reddit, Google, whatever. It'll be listed somewhere. But let's get over to the pros instead. So the pros for us Monster Hunter veterans, we have a lot of the older monsters coming into the game, notably Nargacuga, which is who I'm fighting now, which is an awesome classic. That's from years and years ago when we used to play the Monster Hunter games on the PSP, PlayStation Portable. Those were the golden days. They have the Glavenus coming back. They've got all kinds of new monsters coming back, new and old, I should say, with the expansion, which is pretty cool to see. It's nice to see them bring those guys back. And there are some challenging ones too, like Nargacuga in itself is a pretty challenging boss fight, or at least it was for me back in the day. They're going to be bringing more weapons and armor, or they have brought more weapons and armor, and they delivered on that. The weapons are pretty abundant. There's quite a few of them. There really is. They added on rarity, up to rarity 12, I believe, which is awesome. That's pretty neat. The armor also has quite a bit more. The armor is drastically better than the armor you'd have before the DLC. So even your highest tier armor, your Draken, or your Gigante, or your Xenojiva, does not even make a dent on the beginning armor in the Iceborne DLC. Like, for example, I literally went and I doubled my defense in one of the earliest monster armors you can get in the Iceborne DLC, the Beeratotus, I believe his name is. That monster's armor has literally doubled the defense of all the armor I had in the other DLC, which raises a question of, could they have maybe nerfed the armor a little bit more in terms of defense? Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm noticing that, not necessarily that you want to be 1 KO'd, but a lot of the shots that should have been a one-shot KO maybe take out half my health now, maybe not even half my health. Like, I remember Nargacuga, at least when I last played when he was in another game, that his special, his backflip that he does and then he follows up with the tail whip, that would typically kill you in one shot, whereas now, and it's seen in this video, that I'm hardly getting damaged at all. Maybe like one-third of my health goes down, which I'm gonna attribute that to the armor, unless they severely nerfed Nargacuga in terms of damage. But it leads me to speculate that the armor might be a little bit overpowered. At least we shouldn't have access to it until later on in the Master Rank, which is the new DLC ranking system, as opposed to Hunter Rank. You have Master Rank as you level up and go through quests and optionals and stuff like that. So that leads me to the next point here. There are more quests. Obviously, as an expansion, it continues the story. Not that anybody's really in Monster Hunter for the story, but there are new quests, and it's kind of neat the way they throw the storyline into another world. It's almost more of the same. It's a little bit of repetition, I find, because it's the same type of concept where they find a foreign monster, you have to track it, you have to investigate it and all that, but that's the game. Like, that's what you paid for. You're a Monster Hunter, right? So to me that makes perfect sense. So yeah, that said, all in all, I think the DLC, or the expansion, whichever you want to call it, is a great expansion. I enjoy it, or at least I have enjoyed playing it. But keep in mind, that is because I don't suffer performance issues with my computer, with my setup. Now, you'll notice with this recording that I am dipping down to the mid 40s from my regular 60 FPS. This is also because I'm running OBS to record my gameplay, which unfortunately is adding to the damage here in terms of frames per second. It's really decreasing the frames. So unfortunately I am running at a little bit of a reduced performance, but it's not enough to make a huge impact for me. I'm still able to play freely. When I'm not recording, I usually get between 54 to 60 FPS, which is pretty good for me, and I have no quarrels with it at all, especially considering the Ryzen 5 2600 isn't exactly a high-tier processor by any means. Like I said, my system is completely mid-spec, but I'm still able to enjoy the game fully. But as a final recap, at least for the users who have a 4-core processor, and any Intel 4-core processor, maybe even any 4-core processor at all, to try and stay away from this game for the time being, because it does end up using all the 4 cores to 100% from the experiences that I've seen with other people, and with people that I've played with personally. And they've had the chops, and they've had all kinds of issues. But like I said, there is a workaround. I know there are ways that if you cap your frame limit down to 30, and maybe if you modify some of your settings on the medium end, then you'll be able to get away with playing without any major CPU usage. You'll be at maybe 60-50%. Obviously, you don't want it to slash those frames per second down to 30. You don't want to half it, but you may have to get that playability anyways. That is, if you want to play it now. But my overall recommendation for the DLC would be to wait just a bit before you purchase it, just because they haven't fixed whatever issue that's causing the massive CPU usage yet. But I hope that it is on the way, as I think this has potential to be a great DLC, a great game, and a great addition to the Monster Hunter franchise, really. So, that's about it. If you liked what you saw today, feel free to leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and that's about it. Take her easy.